Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to the 2020 reading survey. I saw this on Books and Lala's channel and so I thought I'd give it a go as well. She listed a bunch of questions in her description, so I've just ripped those and I'm doing them again here. So if you want to look at her video, she has linked a blog creator as well, so I will link all of the relevant stuff. But let's get into the questions. They're basically going over all of my reading that occurred in 2020. So the first question is, how many books did you read last year? And that is 91. I set my goal for 100 and I just fell short of it, but that's okay. I still read a ton of books and I'm really happy with them. And so next is the amount of pages that you read, and I believe I read about 37,000, which is okay. It's lower than before, obviously, because I didn't read 100 books, but that's a lot of pages, so not bad. My most read genre obviously is fantasy, and I wanted to change that this year. And so I wanted to diversify that a little bit, even though I still know that I'm going to read a lot of fantasy because it's my favourite genre. Of course I'm going to read a lot of it. My favourite 2020 release is the next question, and that is a really easy answer because it is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. I did a spoiler-free review and a vlog for it. It isn't on the shelf behind me because my partner is currently reading it, so it is off with him, but such a good book. Next up is a favourite older title you read in 2020. I think for this answer I'm going to have to go The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This is book 8, Proven Guilty. The first one is Stormfront. I got into this series a bit late, but it is still definitely ongoing, so better late than never, honestly. This is about a wizard detective. I love the humour, I love the tone, I love that Jim Butcher continues to build on his characters and give them a surprising depth when I feel like initially they could be caricatures of stereotypes. He makes them so much more, and I appreciate that, and his world building is incredible. It's definitely a series that I've fallen in love with, and I have a whole playlist of Dresden stuff as I go through the series, so if you're a Dresden fan, be sure to check out that content because I have worked hard for it and I love doing it and I love this series and I'm so happy that I finally got into it. The next question is a book that lived up to the hype, and a lot of titles get hyped up on BookTube and Book Twitter and Book Instagram. The book that is hyped up that I am obsessed with and I will only add to the hype for is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It was incredible. I have a whole review for it. I love this book with all my heart. It's one of my new favourites of the entire year last year, and I will continue to hype it up and tell people to read it because it was amazing. It's about Addie. She is in France in the 1700s, but it's also based on her wanting to get out of a situation. She accidentally does a deal, but she does it wrong, and so she ends up getting cursed with immortality. So not only is it in the 1700s, it's also in New York in 2014. So you get those dual timelines to give depth and perspective to her character and her journey, and you also get to see the devil or the demon that she made the deal with, and she also runs into somebody in a bookstore and he remembers her, and her curse is nobody remembers her and she can't form meaning in her life with this curse because people will literally blink and forget that she exists. They'll walk into a different room and be cut off from her visually, and then they'll walk back in and be like, oh, who are you? So it was a wonderful discovery book about identity and how you leave your own mark on people and the world, and I loved it. It also incorporated art and creativity as well, and it was just a book that really spoke to me. So if that sounds like your jam, I'm sure you're going to love Addie as well. And now for a book that did not live up to the hype for me, and that was Rage of Dragons. I read it in a reading vlog, which I will link. This is basically just a video where I promote older videos that I've done. I'm sure it's what everyone else has done who has done this video as well. But anyway, Rage of Dragons, it had a lot more montages and fight scenes rather than character building and character moments than I personally wanted, but I know that some people have adored this book and given it 5 stars. Personally, I only liked it and could give it a 3, and I haven't continued on reading the series, but I know that some people loved it. I obviously didn't, so it's just a subjective personal taste thing, which is basically what all reading is. So not a book that I am obsessed with, but a book that I guess I'm glad I read, so I know what all the hype is about, but it's not a new favourite of mine. Next up is, what is your biggest reading accomplishment of 2020? And mine would be getting my to be read pile down to 0, because I smashed my TBR pile and I thought I could get it to under 30 last year, but it turned out that I got it down to 0, which is incredible to me. So in my latest book haul, all of the books that I've acquired also double as my TBR, because anything new that I acquire now and this year is stuff that I've not owned in the past, which is such a pipe dream to me. I had like over 200 unread books several years ago because I got into this habit of buying stuff while I was studying and then I couldn't read them. And now I have 0 on that list because I've either read them, I've caught up, and I've unhauled, I've discovered my reading tastes and how they've changed. And it's just been a very informative year in 2020 in terms of introspectiveness and reader taste. And I'm really kind of glad that I went on that complex deep dive of, do I like this? Am I forcing myself to read it? It's really helped me DNF books. And I love that I'm embracing the freedom to do that now. I'm a lot more savage when it comes to what I decide to read, and I love that because who has time to waste when you're supposed to be enjoying reading and you're only slogging through a book because you think you should? That's not what reading's about, and I'm glad I discovered that and embraced it in 2020. The next 2 questions are about character. So who is your most favorite character and who is your least favorite character? So my most favorite, there are 2, and one is Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive because he is a soldier who is also a surgeon. He's got a surgeon's upbringing and background, and so he's born to heal people, but then he's taken off and drafted for war, so he's also trained to kill people. So I really like that dichotomy and how he explores depression and how Brandon explores his mental health in the series overall. I love that. He's also got the most cinematic moments in the series, if I'm being honest, and that's why I love reading about him. And then my other favorite character is Maya from The Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, or A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. It's the second book in Hank Green's duology, and I gave it 5 stars. I adored it. Maya is somebody who is fairly quiet, and she discovers a sense of purpose and identity and motivation and rebellion. And I love how fleshed out her character became, and I love the decisions she made, and I love how she was strong and also vulnerable. I love that balance. So Maya and Kaladin are my 2 favorites, and then my least favorite character was probably Yorg from Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. He is a character who you get to see when he's 11 to when he's 13, and he's naturally a prince, but he's on this revenge quest, and he's a very dark character. He rapes people, he sexually abuses them, he kills them, he just does it because he wants to or because he feels he needs to. He doesn't really have an emotional attachment, and he's a character that you're absolutely not supposed to like, and so that's probably why he's my least favourite, because I felt alienated when I was reading about him, but I couldn't stop reading about him because his story was so darkly intriguing. It was interesting and dark, and it was a fantasy that had sci-fi elements to it, which I don't see a lot, and it was also apocalyptic, so it incorporated my 3 favourite genres, so of course I was interested in reading it in general. But Yorg is not one of my favourite characters. I tend to like the kind of rogue characters with a heart of gold, and Yorg is definitely the inverse of that. Next up is a book with the most surprising moment in it, and that has to be The Mask Falling for me. This is a January release, but I got it early and I have a review and a book talk for it, and I got whiplash, like book plot whiplash, when I was reading this, and I chronicled it in my 3rd Vlogmas vlog, which is really funny to me looking back on, to see my mind get exploded by this book. As far as I'm concerned, Samantha Shannon was a genius, and she really had me in this, and that is why this is going to have to be for this question. Obviously, because it's a major plot twist, I can't tell you what it is, but if you've read this book, then you know what happened. Up next is your favourite type of writing that you've encountered this year, and mine would have to be definitely Addie LaRue, because Victoria Schwab's writing in that book was just splendid. It was beautiful. But then I'd also like to add Joe Abercrombie to that, because I read The Trouble with Peace and A Little Hatred, his 2 books in his Age of Madness series, his newest series. They're both behind me, but I can't be bothered pulling them out because I just don't want to turn around. But they are books that have such a distinct tone and distinct characterization, even though there are so many different facets and so many different characters explored. I don't know how Joe Abercrombie manages to do that, but he really knuckles down and encapsulates character so well, and that is why his writing to me really speaks to me, because he just manages to emulate these voices so well that they all sound so distinct. So he's very descriptive, he's very intentional, and he's very tonal in the way that he writes things. He captures everything perfectly. So Addie LaRue and The Trouble with Peace. The next question is the book that you pushed the most people to read. And I don't actually know. Maybe The Mask Falling on the back of my review, but I'm not sure. Maybe the Stormlight books, or maybe Brandon Sanderson in general. If I've pushed you to read a book or you've picked something up because I've talked about it, let me know down below. I know I've had people mention that they've picked something up because they've seen me talking about it like haphazardly through the year, but I haven't actually kept track of what titles people have said, so it will be interesting to know. So let me know if you can remember, because I clearly can't remember, so I don't expect you to, but it'd be interesting to find out. I imagine Brandon Sanderson would be a big one, and I imagine maybe the Dresden Files, because I've made content on that. Maybe Robin Hobb, but I don't speak about her enough, and I want that to change. Next up is book that you'll be recommending the most, and that is absolutely Rhythm of War, but like I said, I want to read more Robin Hobb. Brandon Sanderson is probably one that I recommended in 2020 a lot, and then in 2021, I want to recommend obviously Brandon Sanderson, but also Robin Hobb, because I want to reread her stuff, and I anticipate that I'm going to fall into a deep love for her characters again, like I did on my first read through. So stay tuned. The next one is favourite newly discovered author, and I don't know how accurate this is going to be because I've only read one book by this author and it's in a genre that I don't usually pick up, and that is Sophie Gonzalez's Only Mostly Devastated, which is a retelling of the musical Grease. It had such amazing characters, it had hilarious moments, it also had that undercurrent of emotional impact, and I really loved it. I do have a review. She has a new book coming out this year in April called Perfect on Paper, and she tends to write queer, romance, and funny stuff with emotional impact and value. So naturally, I'm looking forward to her newer release, and I haven't seen many people talk about it, but it's one that is definitely on my books to pre-order, and so hopefully her, because I'd like to read this other book that she's got coming out and then also discover that I loved it, and therefore she can become my favourite author. But I feel like I can't give somebody that title without having read more than one book by them. So jury's still out, but as far as I'm aware and hopeful for, Sophie Gonzalez definitely fits this one. Next up is favourite cover, and I really love the Spellslinger covers, and I read the last book in that series in January 2020, so I'll put it on the screen. The playing cards in the series have a specific meaning and intention, and so I love that the covers reflect roughly what's happening in the books. You can't really tell what they mean from just looking at the covers, but I love the nature of them and how they look like a playing card. I think that's really cool detail, and I also really like the illustration as well, so the Spellslinger series is definitely up there on books with my favourite covers. Next is a book that made you cry, and I surprisingly cried at Only Mostly Devastated, but I also read A Little Life in 2020, and I didn't cry at that book, and I thought I would. I gave it a 4 stars, not a 5, and I talked about it in a wrap-up and a vlog, and so I thought I'd cry, I didn't, and then for a book that I did cry, it was very unexpected. So I feel like I need to start lowering my expectations when I go into books, but to be fair, A Little Life is always touted as being really dark and having an impact, so I guess I just didn't feel it with that book, but that's okay. Next is a book that made you laugh the most, and that would be It Sounded Better in My Head by Nina Kenwood. Usually I would have all of these books to hold up, but I just took a bunch home and I filmed at my partner's house, so sorry, but you're just getting photos. This is a delightful contemporary book. It's in that space between adult and young adult, and it follows a character who is 18. I talked about this in my favourite books of 2020 video, so you can tell that I loved it because it's in a favourites video. So it's just a lot of fun. It's quite funny. It has a brilliant representation for anxiety, and so if that sounds like something you would like, definitely pick it up. It's a book that I didn't expect to love, but I'm really glad that I did. Also, the Dresden Files consistently makes me laugh, and that is part of the reason that I keep going back to them, because just the way that Jim Butcher captures Dresden's tone is excellent, and it always surprises me in its own way, and I just love the series. I keep laughing and I keep getting surprised, so why not return to it? Next up is favourite reread, and that would be The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I did reviews for all of these as I reread them. They're my favourite series, so of course I love them, of course I reread them. However, I didn't really reread much in 2020. That's more of a goal for 2021. So again, this answer is pending because I will come back to it. In 2021, I want to reread, to name a few, Robin Hobb, Brandon Sanderson, so I can do reviews for the rest of his work, and also Red Rising. Those are some of the ones that I want to reread. And then the last question on this tag is my most surprising 5-star read, and that would be Heartstopper Volume 2. I gave Volumes 1 and Volumes 3 a 4 or 4.5 star rating. Volume 2 really got me because it just showed that emotional development of the characters and that depth in their identities, and I loved it, and I didn't expect to really enjoy Heartstopper, so again that made it into my favourites of 2020 video. But there you go, that is the end of this reading tag, reading survey, whatever you want to call it. Again, all of my videos and links will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. Come chat to me down in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.